Today on Let Me Be Frank, Bishop Caggiano is joined by Dr. Steven Cheeseman, the superintendent of our Catholic schools here in the Diocese of Bridgeport. They're going to talk about the state of the schools here in our diocese and the many exciting programs and projects that are in the works here. Oh, and by the way, please join me at St. Mary's in Ridgefield this Friday to see and venerate the relics of St. Padre Pio. I'm so excited. His relics will be there from 12:30 to 6:30 p.m., and then you can stay for Mass at 7 p.m. That's this Friday, March 8th at St. Mary's in Ridgefield. In the meantime, stay right here and listen to today's Let Me Be Frank. You can listen on the radio at 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, or you can use the Veritas app or your favorite podcast app. You know, if you're on the podcast app, make sure you rate us, review us, and give us 5 stars, and check out the other Veritas shows that are on the Veritas channel while you're there. Okay, Let Me Be Frank is brought to you by a grant from Foundations in Faith. Foundations in Faith embraces innovative approaches to funding pastoral care programs in the Diocese of Bridgeport. Resources focus on energizing lifelong faith formation and discipleship, and fostering a commitment to justice and accompaniment with our most vulnerable. From seminarians to retired priests, from baptism to last rites, from suburbs to inner cities, the reach is broad and the impact is meaningful. For more information, visit them on the web at foundationsinfaith.org. Okay, here we go. This is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. I'm Steve Lee, and it is my pleasure, as always, to introduce Bishop Frank Caggiano.
Steve, good morning, my friend. Good morning. Halfway through Lent, here we are. Halfway through the desert.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. It's amazing.
We're getting
isn't
there.
It?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, my God. Well, you know, it'll be Easter.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to deal with Christmas and the after effects. But anyway, today we have a great guest, someone I have worked closely with for many years in the diocese. You heard?
Yes, we do. I think this is the guest with the single greatest first name that we've ever had on. So, I just wanted to say,
I take exception to that, by the way. Okay. I forgive you, though.
You asked a couple weeks ago what my favorite event in Lent is, and I just wanted to say I think I have one now. And really quickly, this Friday in my home parish in St. Mary's in Ridgefield, they're going to have the relics of St. Padre Pio out for veneration all afternoon from 12:30 to 6:30 or something like that. So that's going to be awesome. We love Padre Pio.
Yes, Monsignor Royal just emailed me to ask permission to celebrate the Mass of Padre Pio. I said, yes, even though it's in Lent. Yes, absolutely. So we could ask for his intercession. Yeah, so anyone who wants to come who's listening, St. Mary's, and quite frankly, it's going to be, the relics are going to 7 other churches in our diocese through September. Mm-hmm.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to be at St. Mary's on Friday, so.
Good. Great.
Okay. Anyway, without further ado, I would love to introduce Dr. Steven Cheeseman. Dr. Cheeseman began his career in Catholic education in 1991 at St. John the Evangelist in Long Island. He continued working for the Catholic Church even after he began his teaching career at Mercy High School in Riverhead, New York in 1994. In 2004, Dr. Cheeseman received his doctorate in educational leadership and technology and was an adjunct professor at St. Joseph College in Patchogue. He's also been on the faculty at Fordham University and at Molloy College. And as Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Cheeseman has served the Diocese of Rockville Center and, of course, the Diocese of Bridgeport, where he currently serves. Dr. Cheeseman was recently elected as Vice Chair of the New England Chief Administrators of Catholic Education, and he lives in Stratford with his wife Danielle and his 3 children. Dr. Steve Cheeseman, welcome to Let Me Be Frank.
Good morning. Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, listen, first of all, today is one of the rare occasions we have 2 Steves on, so we're going to have to figure out how to distinguish between the 2 of you. But, Steve, Dr. Steve, you're a great worker, colleague, and in many ways, a visionary leader of Catholic education. And I say that with all blunt honesty, because I think our people, the people of our diocese and in our Catholic schools, there is innovation going on that most of the Catholic dioceses around the country would only dream of having. And that's why I'm delighted that you're here, because I think a lot of people don't know what's going on in our schools. And this is a great way to let them know there's tremendous good news going on. And that's in large part to your leadership and the staff of the office. I'm just going to start by saying thank you for that. And we have time to get into that. But I want to know who Steve Cheeseman is. But I know who you are. But how about the people of God? What are you comfortable sharing about your journey of life?
Thank you, Bishop. So let me start with sort of the present and work my way back. I'm married with 3 kids, all college age or post-college. My career in the church, as Steve mentioned, started when I was 19. I've been at the church ever since. Interestingly, I started working for the church because my friend who drove us to high school, his parents gave him permission to drive to school, but only with the caveat that we go to morning mass on the way.
Oh, I love it.
So we went to daily mass every day. As a result, I got to know my pastor, who eventually gave me a job when I was 19 at the parish. I started pulling weeds and cleaning toilets and doing janitorial stuff. And eventually he realized what my wife also knows, is that I'm not good at cleaning. And it's not my gift. So he gave me a job in the religious ed office. So I've done work through religious ed and youth ministry, and of course teaching. But during that time, I think I benefited both from my Catholic school experience with the Sisters of Mercy, who really taught me to serve. Who that was their main message to us, to serve. And then Monsignor McDonald, who was my pastor at St. John's and the one who gave me my first job and who I worked with for years, I would say he gave me a love for the Eucharist. And I would say combined with those two, that's really sort of shaped who I am. And also he had a very deep devotion to Mary, which eventually I picked up from him, and I share that to this day. So I think those are some of the key pieces. I met my wife at church, and we, which was good because I met her at church. It was bad because Monsignor McDonald thought I was going to be a priest, so when he gave the homily at our wedding, he sort of talked about the good and the bad.
Did he really?
Yeah. Oh, in a funny way. He did. It was funny. But wow. The way Bishop Seller said to him once, I can't believe you let him get away. So kind of funny.
No, but you didn't get away.
I didn't get away. Yeah, here right. I am.
And you're contributing to the life of the church in great ways, which is a lesson for everyone who's listening to us who may not be a priest, a deacon, or consecrated brother or sister. It's the church is in the hands of all of us, right? And the gifts that we share. So, Steve, you have been superintendent of Bridgeport for how many glorious, joyful, fulfilling years? How many of those?
This is 8 years. I've been here 8 years. Yeah, I'm in my 8th year.
Yeah. So, give our listeners a snapshot of the Catholic school educational landscape in our diocese right now. How many schools? How many kids? The whole thing.
Sure. So we have 25 schools that are diocesan or diocesan-sponsored schools. There are 30 altogether. We have about 8,900 kids who attend those schools, which is up. Thankfully, I think over the past 3 years, enrollment's gone up each year. Even this year in the diocese, we're up about 50 some odd kids over last year, which may not sound like a lot, but after years of declining enrollment in Catholic education, we've been able to sort of turn that tide. I think one of the benefits of COVID is it gave people a second look at our schools, and so many of those parents have stayed. And as we look at sustainability, probably one of the best indicators is that we have more kids in kindergarten and first grade than we do in 7th and 8th. So that's a good sign down the line. We have 5 high schools, 20 elementary of those 25 diocesan that pretty much spread throughout Fairfield County. We have I think, a demonstrated commitment to focusing on the individual learning needs of every child. In fact, we've done a lot of work these past couple of years on trying to ensure accessibility for students with special needs in our schools. And we've seen the number of students who demonstrate success with special needs grow. So that's been great. But so overall, the state of schools is good, as they say. We're in really good shape. We always are trying to be better. We can talk more about that in a little bit, but right now things are going well.
Yeah, I'm thrilled at the progress we have made. I think also for the benefit of our listeners, we have founded a number of schools, or they were founded in our diocese with our help. They were also very innovative. Like, for example, why don't you speak very briefly about St. Teresa's in Trumbull?
Yeah, so after a successful launch of Cardinal Kung in Stamford as a classical high school, we were approached by the pastor, actually, about transitioning St. Teresa from what we would say a traditional Catholic school to a classical Catholic school, which focuses on a classical curriculum with great books and, sort of Socratic conversation and dialogue in the classroom, and a very strong Catholic identity. So I think it was about 3 years ago, we started that transition. Time flies when you're having fun, but I think it was about 3 years. And it's amazing the transition we've seen in the school, both in the culture of the school and in the enrollment of the school. Enrollment's grown. It still serves a very diverse population, and does so in a way that is really unique, I think, for the Bridgeport, Trumbull, Stratford area. They've done a really great job.
And I must confess, I was at St. Teresa's this past Saturday for confirmation. And you can tell that these young people, from their religious formation point of view, were very well prepared, right? They were very attentive. And quite frankly, what really impressed me was, because it was raining, remember it was raining a lot on Saturday, and my norm now is that we would take pictures in church. And of course, you know what that's like, right? But I said to the people, please be respectful, because we are in church. We're in the presence of the Lord, the Eucharistic Lord. Almost to the end, there was no talking at all in church. I mean, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. So the formation that's going on is stupendous there. It really is. I mean, I don't know much about the educational philosophy, because that's your world, Steve, not mine. But I mean, something is definitely moving in the right direction there, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me last time I visited was, as I was walking around the classrooms, every class I went into prayed in a different language. So in that day I heard German, Italian, I heard Latin, I heard French, and I heard English, but I heard a whole host of different languages. And it dawned on me that beyond just learning the language, they were actually learning the meaning behind the words that they were saying. So it forced the kids really to rethink or think more carefully about the words they were saying, because they had to translate them. And I think that gives you sort of a deeper understanding of the prayers, and it's more than just the words.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt. Absolutely. The other school that I think we should just highlight is, of course, I've spoken about this in my podcast over these years, and that is, you and I were involved with the decision to have to close Trinity Catholic High School, which was, after a lot of valiant work on your part, your staff, the leadership of the school at the time. It just was at the point where it was not viable anymore. And that was a dark day for many, ourselves included. But out of that decision, there has been now another school that has grown, and grown fairly rapidly, which is being led by the Salvadorian sisters. Do you want to speak about that school too?
Yeah, it's it is amazing sometimes how from great sadness comes great joy. But that was the closing of Trinity Catholic was, as you said, really a sad time, because we tried everything we could possibly think of, and it just didn't work. And sometimes, as you said to me often, sometimes we just have to get out of the way, and let God's will happen, and keep praying to Mary, and she'll help us get out of the way sometimes. And I think that's what we did. We got out of the way, and we allowed whatever was going to happen. And you had dreamed of a K-12 campus when we were working on Trinity. And I've often heard you say, we got it. We didn't get it the way we thought we were going to get it, but we got it.
Exactly.
And they are thriving. The sisters do an amazing job on that same campus as Cardinal Kung. To think that two schools that are thriving and growing came out of really a school that was struggling, gives you a lot of hope for what can happen when you do your best and then get out of the way and let what's going to happen.
Right. The spiritual lesson, of course, is not to think that we have the solution, but rather is to surrender to the solution God has in mind for what needs to be done. Right. And then you see the thriving. Again, for everyone's knowledge, at the school in Stanford, at Mater Salvatoris, the sisters are very active in the school. I think there are 5 or 6 sisters who teach in the school, and there are 2 priests and a brother who are also involved. And that for those of us who are older, and Steve, you had this experience too with Sisters Mercy when the religious were involved in the school. It gave a charism to the school that, it's hard to describe. It was like it colored the air of the whole thing, right? And that is really what they're building, right, in Stanford. So I think it will continue to grow. Right? Certainly will continue to grow. May offer some other, because we'll get to the improvements and the innovation maybe after our break. But so everyone knows, St. Catherine's Center is also growing, right? Is it not, in Fairfield?
Yeah, they've done an amazing job there at growing, especially their adult program. One of the things they've done is they promise that anyone who enters the adult program, they will do everything they can to keep them. So when students, or actually adults, graduate from their day program into their adult program, they promise to do everything they can to keep them. But so that means they have to keep finding space and keep growing. They were able to have a successful capital campaign, and we were able to bless their new renovations. And they basically, I think, more than doubled the size of the building. And the space that they have available and the work that they've done to allow great opportunity for the people in their care has been amazing.
And I have to, again, Helen Berland, who was the director of the center, she really gave birth to just so much of what has happened. And now there's new leadership that's continuing that work. The board, right, tremendously talented, but also very extraordinarily dedicated people, right, to the mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, for everyone's knowledge, St. Catherine's Center for Special Needs has within it St. Catherine's Academy. Is that not correct? Right? Correct. So the academy actually does the education, right, of younger people.
Correct. That would be the sort of the Catholic school for the school age population, and then they move into the to the adult program.
And since we're on high schools, I'm going to ask you, all this recent news about Notre Dame transferring into Sacred Heart University. I'm sure a lot of people have questions about that, so maybe we could take a few moments just to let people know what's going on there.
Yeah, this is really one of those things that I think is a natural evolution of relationship, where for years, obviously Notre Dame and Sacred Heart have been connected forever, as Sacred Heart took, residents on their original campus, and they were moved Notre Dame across the street. But they've had a strong relationship for years with partnerships for tuition, use of facilities, programmatic cooperation. So this is almost really, I think, a natural evolution in their relationship where bringing them closer together just made a lot of sense. And I think this is an amazing opportunity for the students and faculty of Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
For the students, they'll have a whole new, world of opportunity for courses and participation in activities. And for the faculty, strong professional development with the university, I think will really benefit them, benefit all of them.
And I think it's also worth mentioning to everyone who's listening that, I'm keenly aware, as everyone is, that in the Catholic university level of education, there are many different opinions and assessments of how Catholic universities are, while they strive to teach the Catholic faith. But on the other hand, there's academic freedom and, pursuit of questioning and all the rest. And that could be a separate podcast. I can invite you back and we could talk about that philosophically, right? But in the case of Notre Dame, so that everyone understands, we were in dialogue with the university, and the university was very willing to allow us to really manage the Catholic identity of Notre Dame, even after it becomes part of Sacred Heart University, so that I would be appointing the chaplain. The curriculum basically follows ours. The rubric for assessment of Catholic identity would basically be ours. I would sit on the board of the high school so that I myself, as the bishop, can just monitor that all goes well. So I think the safeguards that exist in our schools remain even at Notre Dame as part of Sacred Heart. So what this evolution is all the benefits you described, and the benefit of remaining Catholic, as all our other high schools, by the same standards as our other high schools. So it's a win-win-win all across the board. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one other thing too, innovation. So there's so much, right? In the last, let's do some history first, right? So the church, for perhaps 4 or 5 generations, since the Council of Baltimore, where it mandated that every parish have a parochial school, has used the model of a parochial school, which is a school that is sponsored by the parish. Now, when parishes were huge and thriving, that was easy. And the religious taught, it was easy to do that. And then, as we know, for all the changes, it became more and more difficult. So in our diocese, we had a history. Now, correct me, Steve, I'm remembering this. I think I am remembering it correctly. That we went from parochial school model to a regional school model to a diocesan school model. So when I came to the diocese and you became superintendent, our schools were diocesan schools. But the difficulty with that model is that the local leadership, the local pastors, the local clergy were like one step removed from the schools that were literally in their communities, right? So we have evolved to a new model that tries to keep both, right? The benefit of having the bishop involved, but on the other hand, involving local leadership and the pastors, and that's the academy model. So why don't we explain to our people what that really looks like?
Yeah, sure. So we have, as you said, 2 models, diocesan and diocesan-sponsored schools. So diocesan-sponsored are the schools you just described, and in those cases, there's a 2-tiered board of limited jurisdiction where the bishop is able to appoint a board of directors who will sort of manage the overall functioning of the school, the managerial stuff, the administration of it. And, I think the big difference, everything that we've talked about so far is really about innovative models. How do we ensure the sustainability of Catholic schools into the future, well beyond our time here? And I think everything we've talked about is just being open to innovation. And this model is innovative because it gives back to the people of the community, both the local pastor, as well as the lay people in the community. It gives them the ability to be empowered to manage the school and be involved in a much more intentional way than just giving advice.
Right.
On diocesan schools, we have advisory boards, so they get a lot more say in terms of policy. and
Right.
direction,
Exactly.
while you maintain Catholic identity and strategic visioning.
Right. Because in a way, the local leadership understands the local needs very well. And please God, with the commitment that they have to address those needs. But on the other hand, there are universal needs that we as you as the superintendent and I as bishop want to make sure they don't forget in the process. And that's why I think the two-tier model really seems to work, right? Is that your assessment?
Yeah, and while some see it as sort of a distance away from the diocese, it actually brings us closer together, because I sit on all those boards, where I didn't sit on advisory boards. I sit on every one of those. So I actually know more of what's going on and have more of a sort of an influence and support for what the school's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I must confess, I think, and of course, the academy model rises and falls on the individuals who sit on the board of directors, but that's no different than a diocese rises and falls on the bishop, who's the bishop in many ways, or the superintendent for all the schools, or the principal. I mean, leadership is leadership, right? So you've spent a lot of time developing that leadership, and that's one of the innovations that maybe on the other side of the break we could start with, to explain to people what services you provide to serve the leadership so that they could lead.
Great.
Yeah, we can get to that, as you said, Excellency, on the other side of the break. So let's take a quick one now. This is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. His Excellency is speaking with Dr. Steven Cheeseman, Superintendent of Schools for the Diocese of Bridgeport, and we will be right back.
If you're concerned about your end-of-life plans, searching for a Catholic cemetery, or have loved ones who are buried in one of the 14 Catholic cemeteries throughout Fairfield County, now might be a good time to begin planning for yourself or for other family members. Call one of our family advisors at 203-742-1450 and select option 5 to leave a message, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org. Many people don't realize that they can be buried with their deceased loved ones, even if all of the family's in-ground plots have been taken. The Diocese of Bridgeport Catholic Cemeteries provides in-ground burials, as well as columbarium and mausoleum options. This makes it possible to unite your family together in the same cemetery, and it's an opportunity to build a bridge for your family back to the church. Talking about this issue is not easy, but pre-need planning makes your wishes clear, reduces cost, and helps your family avoid difficult decisions at a time of grief and loss. You can start your planning now by contacting one of our family advisors at 203-742-1450 and select option 5, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org. We can guide you through the options, regulations, and considerations to help you make the best decisions for your family. The number is 203-742-1450 and select option 5, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org.
Okay, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank with Bishop Frank Caggiano. His Excellency has been speaking with Dr. Steven Cheeseman about the state of schools here in the diocese and all the exciting things that are coming up next.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the leadership formation then, Steve.
Yeah, so I think what we've tried to do differently in the past couple of years is move away from just a big sort of workshop or meetings to really walking with boards. So by what I mean by that is, by me attending the board, I get to know board members. I get to know the chairs. Almost every one of them have my cell phone number. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to connect. And from those conversations, I can then figure out how do we put together formation for them that is specific. So I think it's much more intentional to their needs, as opposed to sort of just the rote, normal everyday stuff,
right?
Sort of the business stuff. So we've moved away from that a bit, I hope. And then in terms of school leaders, we've done a lot to bring in both formation for faith, as well as formation for what it means to run a business, because our principals literally are running a business as Catholic school principals. So we've tried to focus on both. And then go ahead.
No, please.
And then there's the sort of spiritual side of things. We purchased Hallow for all of our principals and all of our teachers in the hopes that it will not only support them in their prayer life, but also that they would begin to use it as a tool in their classrooms. So I think I would say we've moved away from the traditional just have a meeting to how can we actually support them in their everyday, what they need to do.
So in a sense, it's a living out of the one, because you're getting to know people, you're accompanying leadership, and then you're going to give them the opportunities of formation, whether it's truth, beauty, goodness, whatever it may be, so that they can actually grow in both leadership and in their faith. So it's the one in action, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes from, for us, when we started the personalized learning initiative for students, a couple of years in, a teacher at a meeting said to me, we do personalized learning for students. We really should do it for teachers too, because we're all in different places. And I said, you're right. That's a great idea. So that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to intentionally create personalized learning opportunities that meet individual teachers' needs.
Explain to our listeners the personalized learning initiative for students. That was an innovation that occurred years ago. Tell us what that was and how that helped.
Yeah, so we began that, maybe 7 years ago. I'm not even sure anymore. Maybe 6 years ago, and it really was an opportunity to give teachers the tools they needed to teach the way they always wanted to teach, which is get to know your students and be able to meet them where they are. I think every teacher comes out of college with that desire. And what happens is in a regular classroom, if you don't do that intentionally, you end up sort of teaching to the middle of the class, the middle child that doesn't really exist. And so the personalized learning tools, which include some, computer assisted assessment, which allows a student as they're working on a task to be challenged more or to get reinforcement if they're not getting something. And that's in reading and math especially. But that gives data to teachers, that work that the students do. So not only is it helping the student as they're doing the path, but it's actually giving the teacher actionable data. The teachers then form groups. We use generally a station rotation model where, the teacher will be with a small group of kids while another group is working on a project, while another group is maybe working on the computer, the assisted assessment. By identifying where kids are, both their gifts, their talents, their strengths, their weaknesses, we can create a personalized learning plan for every child, which is our ultimate goal. Those who might be familiar with special education know about IEPs, which is, an individualized education plan for a student with special needs. We're trying to do that for every child, because that gives the teacher everything they need to know, both from an academic piece to the social piece. And helps them sort of meet them where they are. And I think it says a lot about, the teacher's desire to respect the dignity of every child, right? To get to know them and then adjust what they do based on what they learn about the child. And that had a sort of a secondary unanticipated consequence, positive consequence when COVID hit. Because our schools were already using a lot of these tech tools to improve instruction, when COVID happened and we had to make the switch to at-home learning, we were literally able to do it over a weekend. So most schools closed on a Friday and were able to reopen on a Monday. Right. And unlike many of the public school counterparts, we actually had full days of learning. Or almost full days of learning. Now it varied based on school community, but for the most part, I think our teachers really stepped up and did an amazing job because they had the tools to do it. Yeah.
And again, it sees the student as a whole person. So it's education within Catholic formation, which it makes us who we are. So we form the mind, we form the heart, we form the will, we teach virtue, we help them to understand the beauty of things, right? Both in revealed and in natural world, the pursuit of truth, to become a critical learner. I've sat through much of this, and I believe all of it. I think we do a tremendous job, and it's all about the one, right? And that's where technology can help us, right? It's not always an enemy, right?
Yeah. And being able to use it wisely, it's a skill that students need to learn as they become adults. And I think it demonstrates, this model really demonstrates in action sort of our belief that Catholic identity and academic excellence are not mutually exclusive, that academic excellence comes from our Catholic identity.
Right. The other thing, too, is I think to remind people is that our schools are not very large population-wise. And while from a financial point of view, of course, there's always a question we want to grow. On the other hand, we don't want to grow too big because of everything you're talking about the relationships that exist, that are created between student and teacher and principal, between the staff and yourself. It's part of the hallmarks of Catholic education, right?
Yeah, I think the ability to get to know and love your students and demonstrate that in the way that you work with them, it is the hallmark of who we are as Catholics and as Catholic schools.
And parents, to get to know them too, right? Absolutely. Okay, so now most people don't realize you have another job besides being superintendent of schools, and that is you are the acting executive director of the Seton Collaborative. Now, what is the Seton Collaborative? Tell us, what is this?
So the Seton Collaborative is at its base is an infrastructure support system. It's a shared services model where we provide opportunities for collaboration. And we do that in two ways or in two places. We do it in schools and we do it in parishes. And sometimes we do it in parish and school together. So on the school side, we focus a lot on IT and finances. So in an effort to improve sort of the infrastructure service, and that's so as part of Seton, we also take care of IT now for the diocese. So there's that piece, sort of that back office infrastructure support. The idea that when you can leverage across multiple entities, you can use your resources more wisely. The other side of that is the parish collaborations, where you've done a lot of work really in helping pastors come together and identify areas of need where they can collaborate together. So, for example, I've been working with the Stratford pastors on how they can build the Catholic community of Stratford, rather than just the 5 individual parishes. While they remain unique and separate and their own parish entities, there are things that unite them.
Absolutely.
How can they, if you have a couple of kids in religious ed in every parish, how can you leverage that?
Absolutely.
In a way that makes everybody comfortable and makes everybody happy and serves the needs of the students.
Right. In a sense, it recognizes the fact that there are challenges bigger than any one parish can manage on its own, and we have to draw it together. So it's almost, in a sense, like we talk about the academy model: local parish strength, but you cross parish lines to address challenges bigger than any parish can face on their own. I mean, I've done 7 of the 9 regional meetings, and it's all the local leadership of a deanery. All 7 of them are enthusiastically in support of regional cooperation. It's amazing. It really is. It's amazing.
Just from my own personal experience sitting with the 5 pastors in Stratford, the synergy that happens when they start talking about what's going on in their parishes and how they can work together is really great to watch. And I think, we see that both at the pastor level and that will trickle down to parish leadership and ultimately to the parishes. It's not about, what's nice is it's not about, reorganizing parishes. That's not what this is. It's really just a way to share resources in a way that makes sense and strengthens every individual parish.
Right. In a way, it's setting aside the institutional challenges for a bit focusing in on discipleship and ministry in the confident hope that the institutional issues will be resolved once you have discipleship growing again and ministry growing. Everything else will fall into place, right? That's really what we're talking about. All right. So, Steve, you have other things cooking in your minestrone. You have other ingredients of innovation. So tell us what's on the docket here.
Yeah, we have, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot of good things happening. So first, we are just launching this month, in March, the Aquinas Institute for Teacher Formation, which is really 3 programs within the Institute. The first is one of the biggest challenges we have in Catholic education is finding quality teachers who are also quality Catholic teachers. And, we've sort of been chasing after the same unicorn that everybody else is chasing. And what we realized is we have so many of people who are already mission aligned, who already possess the character and traits that you'd want to see in a teacher, and already have a love for the church and working in the church with young people. They just don't have the degree, or they don't have the teaching credential. So under the Aquinas Institute, we've set up a program where someone who maybe is already working in a school as a pre-K aide or a lunch monitor, or is working in or volunteering in a parish as a catechist, that doesn't have all the credentials to teach in a Catholic school, we will actually work with them to get the credentials. And that's sort of an outgrowth of our fellowship program that's already in existence. We have 6 fellows in the diocese who work at a number of our schools, who we help them get a master's degree so that they can either teach or be a counselor, or even work on the business side of schools. But the starting factor is that they have to want to work in a school, and they have to be on fire with faith, and they have to want to share that faith with young people. And then from there, we can work with them on everything else. So that's one initiative that's just starting. And the other one that we are about to embark on is what we're calling the Wellness Initiative. And that comes out of, there's a couple of things that have struck me over the past few years. The first is post-COVID, the amount of trauma that exists, and the levels of angst and anxiety that exist among our young people. And, I can quote you all kinds of statistics, but I won't bore you with them. Things on suicidality, and, kids who experience anxiety and emergency room visits, things like that. But we're also seeing, I almost laughed to myself. I saw some advertisement someone was doing, and it had to do with young people and the loss of their identity. And the reason I almost chuckled inside, sort of an ironic laugh, is the very organization that was talking about how young people have lost their identity is an organization that has helped that to happen. And what I mean by that is, we sort of live in this secular society that has, in many ways, attacked the sociological institutions that help provide identity. Things like the church, things like the family. So many of these institutions are under attack, and as a result, where young people used to get their identity, they're no longer finding it. And it's sort of that infinite browsing, like on Netflix when you're trying to find a movie. And I think if we look at young people who are going through this trauma or through these times of, loss of identity and anxiety, my question is, who's helping them? Who's guiding them? And in my mind, we need people who are, committed to the faith, who are committed to the church, and who will guide them in a way that is reflective of a lens of faith. Because it makes me it gives me a pause when I think of the education and the sort of worldview of some of the people who our kids might be exposed to in their most vulnerable times. And not that they're bad people, they just might believe things differently than we see them as Catholics. And so in my my mind, I think we need to develop strong Catholic counselors and to provide them to our schools and hopefully across parishes, so that in a young person's most vulnerable time, we can offer them support by someone who can guide them that possesses a Catholic faith lens of life, a Catholic worldview. So to me, that's extremely important. So we're actually rolling out, as part of our Aquinas Fellowship, we have some counselors who will be graduating, and then we'll be hiring some other ones that we can share among schools. And also my hope is to hire a care coordinator who would not only serve the young people and just make sure that, the counselors who are working with them are doing what they're supposed to be doing and are organized correctly, but also to support parents and teachers, because sometimes we forget that the same sort of angst that came from the pandemic and the lack of socialization, all that, and finances and so forth has also affected the adults. And so, providing support to teachers and to parents, to me, is a paramount concern. So this care coordinator would be really the conduit to other services like Catholic charities or other, support services that people might need. So, I mean, those are two of the big things that we're looking at.
Right. If I may add, too, for our listeners' sake, in part of the COVID recovery monies, there was money set aside for schools to have some of these counseling services, but that money is soon going to run out. That's why there's an urgency to launch this program, and please God, get the donors who will help us to finance this critical need. Is that not the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I think we learned by hiring, in some cases we had to work with outside firms, right? Because the government money has to go to third parties. We had to work really hard in the interview process to find people that, we felt were the right fit for our schools. So I think if we can develop them and start with people who have a firm commitment to the faith, I think that will make a huge difference in the lives of our young people.
Without a doubt. May I also ask you to you and I have been working, I've been, not me per se. I mean, I had the idea, you agreed with the idea, you have really launched this. For our high school kids, the questions of faith, the obstacles to faith, what we traditionally call apologetics. You've been doing some work in that too to help prepare our young people. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so we've been working with the school chaplains and the campus ministers and the department chairs and the principals to develop what we're calling an apologetics overlay, which is really over the course of 4 years. It's really a more intentional focus on areas where there is more debate once you step outside of our realm, right? So where there's questions, where, it's natural that adolescents and young people, they hear things, they see things, and so they question. And so what this does is it intentionally allows those questions to happen. It fosters the opportunity for questions, and it engages the priest chaplains and deacons who are in a school to really have the opportunity to sort of have a laser focus on specific topics. So the idea is that over the course of 4 years, we will be able to infuse in the curriculum that already exists, the opportunity to really have good conversations about topics that create questions in young people's minds.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. I've talked about that over the last few years. Absolutely, especially the mistaken belief that truth is only factual and provable, which is what the modern world operates out of. And that's exactly not the case, right? And that becomes an obstacle to faith. Now, we're also working on the premise that the earlier you engage young people, children, in the act of faith, the greater the possibility that faith will become a part of the fabric of their life. And I know a lot of parents struggle because they don't have the resources as to when they could, if they could not afford all 12 years of Catholic education, where should their child go, at what level? And of course, the prudential judgment is up to the parent. But I think it's true to say the earlier the formation starts, the better. So you have been involved in some feasibility studies for early learning. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we've engaged with a firm to do some feasibility studies for the possibility of opening early learning centers. We're looking at a couple of areas of the diocese where we think it could work. We've just started that process. I put together a committee last year and we started looking. We could not come up with the right location. And we knew one of the takeaways was we really needed to do some market research to find out the best spot to sort of focus our attention geographically. So that's what we're doing. We've started that process. We're also looking, again, in the sort of theme of innovation and accessibility, the idea of how do we create the desire and the opportunity for Catholic education among as many young people as possible, so that we can get them in and work on the process of evangelization that hopefully their parents have started, and work with those parents as we develop it. And there are two other areas we thought would be particularly attractive. One is in the area of athletics, and one is in the area of fine arts. And so the other feasibility studies we're doing is there a market for a Catholic school that is a traditional, excellent Catholic school, but also has as its focus athletics and developing those skills in young people? And additionally, is there a market for a school that would help develop the skills in the fine arts in young people?
Absolutely.
With the understanding that all kids have different skills and gifts and talents. How do we maximize that? Really at the end of the day, all for the glory of God and trying to get young people where they need to go, whether it be, in college, or whatever their next step is. Our hope is that all our kids, I think we're at a 99.5% college rate. But there's also the heaven piece, right? So how do we get them to college in heaven? How do we develop in them their God-given skills and put them on the right path? So hopefully these feasibility studies will give us some direction.
Right. Well, I'm telling you, you're doing a tremendous job. You, your staff, the principals, the leadership of our schools, they're really doing a tremendous job. And just for the record, before we end, because, this is Let Me Be Frank, we do it all at a fraction of the cost of our colleagues in other educational systems, including the public school system. And so for those who are, I think, reasonable and who want to look at the common good and to help society, this idea that the state is not available to help us in some way, I think cuts our nose off to spite our face. In general, for the larger community, but particularly for us, for generations, we have formed leaders. We have formed good, upright people at a fraction of the cost, and quite frankly, at no burden to the civil governments. And I think maybe the time has come for the government to start investing on what works. End of commercial.
Okay. On that note, let's take another quick break. So this is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. Bishop Caggiano has been talking with Dr. Steven Cheeseman, Superintendent of Schools here in the diocese, and we will come right back with a listener question.
Hey, this is Matt Sparazza from The Tangent. Each week on The Tangent, my co-host, Father Sam Kachuba, and I go on tangents to show how intertwined the Catholic faith and our culture really are. With guests like Scott Hahn, Dr. Greg Pitaro, Kristalina Everett, and so many more, The Tangent is always entertaining and informative. Check us out on Fridays at 12:30 on 103.9 FM, 1350 AM, anytime on the Veritas app, or wherever you get your podcasts. God bless.
Okay, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank with Bishop Frank Caggiano. All right, Excellency, very interesting question came in this week, so here it is. It says, how do seminarians train to hear confessions?
It's a great question. I would say in a number of ways. Number one, they themselves should have the religious habit of going to confession on a regular basis. So they have the experience of it themselves as a penitent, and I'm sure all of them do. There's the pastoral and theological formation that occurs in the classroom. And quite frankly, the last piece of the puzzle is the practicum. So they actually, in the latter part of their theological formation in the seminary, are given scenarios, and they play act what they would do, and they're critiqued by their classmates and faculty so that they learn the basic skills. Right? I must confess, as I've told you before, when I was newly ordained, I was terrified of the confessional, only because I was deathly afraid of what someone would say and thinking to myself, well, what do I say in return? Until I realized it wasn't about me, it's about the Lord and His mercy. It's all about His mercy, right? And to try to be of help to help people to realize He will conquer all sin if you're sorry for it. Anyway, so there is an ample training.
That's great. That's great. So if you have a question for Bishop Frank, you can send it in on social media, or you can email questions@veritascatholic.com. Bishop Frank Caggiano is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So is Veritas Catholic Network. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Foundations in Faith. A grant from the St. Therese Fund for Evangelization makes it possible for us to bring Let Me Be Frank to you. Foundations in Faith is committed to supporting and transforming pastoral ministries in the Diocese of Bridgeport, and you can learn more about their outstanding work at foundationsinfaith.org. And thank you, Dr. Steven Cheeseman, for joining us. I mean, there's so much stuff happening here. It's great to see that you and the leadership are being so proactive in strengthening education here.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I just wanted, my last word would be just a big thank you to everyone I get to work with here in the diocese, and especially my team in the Office of the Superintendent. It really is a team effort.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for your great work. And while we pray, shall we? In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, as we've come to this point in our Lenten journey, continue to strengthen our minds and hearts, that we may continue to walk this road of conversion and repentance and new life in your Son, Jesus. Bless our schools, the communities they form, the leadership that guides them, Steve and his staff, so that our Catholic schools may always give you honor and glory. We make our prayer in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I will see you both.